Hey, thanks for being a part of the conversation. Let's do some pod crashing. Episode number 343 is with Andrea Gunning and Ben Fetterman from the podcast There and Gone, South Street. How did you get involved with this podcast? Because, I mean, first of all, the way that you guys share a story is just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, this is a 19-and-a-half-year-old story. Danielle Imbo and Richard Patrone disappeared off a street on Philadelphia, South Street, which is probably one of the most, especially in 2005, the most popular street in Philadelphia as it relates to nightlife, restaurants, and really culture in general. In fact, dating us all, Real World Philadelphia filmed the year that these two disappeared. And, you know, for Andrea and me, we grew up in Philadelphia. This crime took place in our backyard. Andrea was a senior in high school at the time. I was a junior. And so this story stuck with us. And when we got into this space and started Glass Podcasts, you know, we started looking at stories that the two of us, wanted to tell. And we had both known this story, grew up with this story as a cautionary tale in Philadelphia, and quickly learned how many people in our network knew the families. Ooh. And so, you know, from there, we started reaching out. We met with both families. We met with the FBI and local law enforcement, and learned the impact that we could bring by sharing this story with the nation. And so we've spent the last 4 years covering and reporting on it.
See, that's always been one of the biggest inspirations about real true podcasting and true crime podcasting, the amount of time that is invested in order for this moment to happen. I mean, because we don't know as listeners what goes into each 37-minute episode. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes on, and I'm so empowered by you guys because of that.
I appreciate you saying it, because, you know, as creators, you never know who's listening. I think what keeps us going is hopefully the impact that the reporting, you know, the interviews, what we're sharing, what that impact can bring, not only to just the individual families who are dealing with such loss and trauma and are praying for justice every day for their two loved ones that have been missing for 19 years, but also an entire city and an individual listener who may be going through their own grief, their own trauma, whatever they're going through that day, and the ability to share something that could move someone either in their own personal life or to act and create their own impact in their lives, whether that's, you know, in something they're dealing with, or because they have a piece of information about the story that we're reporting on. That's the goal. And, you know, I think the FBI has empowered us to say, there are people, whether in Philadelphia or around this country, that know what happened to Richard Patrone and Danielle Imbo, and it's going to take a listener, it's going to take a citizen to come forward with that little piece of evidence that has eluded the FBI for 19 years, to ideally bring those who are responsible for the disappearance to justice.
I think one of the things that's going to help you guys with that, and I know that on iHeartRadio, I don't know what the other platforms are doing, but they actually have the transcripts of what you guys are putting on each one of the episodes. And I think you're absolutely right. They're going to listen to the podcast, but then they're going to go in there and they're going to read the transcripts, and they're going to say, I know this story. And there's such a connection with this podcast and the community, because I think everybody in their own town has gone through something like this.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. And, you know, I think there is something about the power of storytelling. I think that, you know, we've gotten the question before, why do people listen to true crime? And I do think there's a level of just built within our DNA. We are storytellers. We are curious participants in learning more about not just ourselves, but what others go through every day. And, you know, in telling this story, Andrea and I, you know, we have a number of true crime hits under our belt. We have a number of podcasts under our belt. She and I have never come across a story like this. When we started reporting on this 4 years ago, we had no idea what we were undertaking. Just the level of detail, the facts, the people involved, both on the family side, the victims of this senseless tragedy, but also the folks that we've started uncovering that likely have something to do with their disappearance. I mean, Andrea said something really profound to me. Philly is the city of brotherly love. And, I think if you meet anyone from Philadelphia, they love this city. And there's a lot of people who move back and plant roots here. I think she and I have come to the realization that as much as we love this city, man, we fear it too. There's a lot of scary stuff that we've come across that we had no realization was going on, in our backyard. And I think that's part of the reason you tell these stories and you do this, is to shed a light on the shadows that exist within our communities. And hopefully, by us doing this, we can start to shine a light on some of the injustices, corruption, violence, and bad actors that exist in our backyard.
Doesn't this also take journalism up to a whole completely different level? Because, the way that you guys are telling these stories, it's not fitting into a 30-second news bite on a talk radio station, or even a 2-minute news bite on the 5 o'clock news.
I'm going to kick that one to Andrea, because that's been a very important part of the telling of this story.
Yeah, and I have to say, week to week, the story evolves. Because we get people writing in, we get people listening and saying, you know what, I haven't spoken about this in 20 years. I want my voice to be heard. And so it's not like a TV show where you have a certain set schedule in terms of production. We are anybody that wants to come on and that has information or wants to share pieces of the story that they haven't shared before. We will make that time. And so it's really fascinating, because week to week, as the show comes out, we get people reaching out and saying, I didn't see this way. I want the truth to be told about this. And so it's really fascinating. It is energizing people who haven't spoken, in 20 years to do so.
So in a really creative way, you guys have to be students. You have to be great listeners. You have to participate. It's not just like, hey, we just went out here and we got these sound bites. You are growing a show. Each one of these is a grown piece of fruit.
It takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of emotional energy, but, it is 100% worth it. Each episode is a different theme, and we cover different topics, but it's all about this little universe that is this story. And I think each individual episode is unique in its own way, but it's building onto a larger story.
Just hearing you say that explains a lot to me, how I can listen to 2 and 3 different episodes in a row, because it does. It's got a different vibe to it, and I'm not in that same that same rhythm and beat of each episode.
Right. Each episode is designed to learn something about the characters or the city and kind of build off of one another. But you're going in really understanding a specific piece of the investigation that we want audiences to think about and walk away from.
Well, Danielle had a very exciting life. Not always on the up and, on happy and all that kind of stuff, because she went through the affair. But at the same time, she made that choice of wanting to be alone. I think that was straight, but things don't play out the way that we want them to.
Yeah, I think what Danielle was going through as a woman in her mid-30s, raising, an infant just under 2 years old, I have a lot of empathy for her. Working and investigating this story and these characters, I see myself in Danielle in many ways. I've had relationships that were complicated, and you've had to make decisions. Do you stay in it, or do you walk away, or do you want to be alone and get clarity? These are real life experiences that people can relate to. So what Danielle was going through the year before she disappeared, I think a lot of women would understand. And then on the other hand, you have Richard, who, was just a normal guy working in his family bakery, raising his daughter Angela, who was 14. He was a girl dad. Just this, these are salt of the earth people just trying to work and raise their kids. And so I think a lot of people will relate to these people and the characters in this story. And that's why working on this has been, it's been difficult, Arrow. It's been, we really care about bringing justice for them. But, I see my family and their families. And that's why I felt so compelled, and so did Ben, to put the amount of time that it has taken into this show.
How did you prepare to go into the interviews with the family members and people that know of the story? Because I mean, you've got to go in there with an open heart, and the expectation has got to be shocking sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy. I mean, to get the interviews, it took a lot of pre-meetings with them to build trust and rapport. We first, when we first wanted to take this story on, we reached out to the FBI for an initial meeting because we understood that they were the gatekeepers of everything in terms of this investigation. And we honestly probably wouldn't have gotten those initial meetings with the family if we didn't get a check mark from the FBI. The FBI really put us in touch with them. And then from there, it was meetings, phone calls, rapport building, and then interviews. Yeah. It's not like you were just meeting them for the first time and then rolling. They had to trust us. I mean, you have to understand, it's been almost 20 years. Almost 20 years. And when they do projects like this, hope begins to resurface, that new information will happen. And we don't take that lightly.
Yeah.
Ben, do you have any thoughts on that?
I was just going to say these are evolving conversations too. When we first met Danielle's family, there was a very clear boundary that Danielle's brother would be speaking on behalf of the family. And, I think Andrea and I have spent somewhere around probably 10 to 12 hours around their dining room. And over time, you just have more conversations and more conversations. And then, we just got a text this week that a family member, I won't name who, and tune into the podcast, but a family member of Danielle's that has not spoken on the record in 19 and a half years has agreed to sit down and speak with us. So wow. I think you have to go in with no expectations. I think, honestly, Arrow, you hit the nail on the head. Go in with an open heart, especially around these stories, because you don't know. We're not in their shoes. And with the grief and the trauma that they're going through, and the fact that they have no answers, no idea where their loved one is. They don't have the traditional grieving, rituals that we have as human beings. There is no graveside. There is no memorial because there is no body. And I hate to be, dark about that. So to go in with any agenda, any expectation, any sort of, what you want to get out of it, you're limiting the possibility of what you can learn in speaking with these family members.
What many listeners don't understand is that somebody who has gone through a murder in their family or somebody nearby is that you never lose that sense of emptiness, because my wife's mother was murdered, and to this day, I mean, we're talking 40 years later, she's still, she can't, because they never got the killer. They never got him, or her, whoever did it.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Arrow. I mean,
but see, it's taking people like yourself, though, in order to help educate those that are mourning in their own personal lives.
Yeah, and one of the things that we noticed, just being Philadelphia natives, is that, this story would resurface once a year around the anniversary, as they call it, on local news, and do the push. And, that's hard because it's an everyday sentence for these families. It's not just on the anniversary. I mean, yeah, that's particularly hard, but for them, they're living with this every day. I mean, Danielle's mother wakes up every morning with a fresh set of tears. She has a bed made with a present on it for Danielle's return. I mean, this is very real for them. And we wanted to be able to put together a comprehensive story that honored everyone's perspective and truth, and, honor their grief, because it's so real. And it has been real and intense for almost 20 years. Wow. So I hear you. They live with it every day.
I totally believe in spirit guides and keepers, and I believe that when you're called to a story like this, you're being talked to from a different universe. And do you feel something like that as you uncover this story?
There was just a lot of coincidences as to what kind of started to gravitate towards this story and taking this on. Richard worked at his family bakery in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and my sister lived above that bakery. And we used to wake up every morning and smell the cupcakes and everything that Richard was making. Like, he was always like an arm's length away. I mean, Ben lived on that street where the bakery was. We have a colleague whose brother was best friends with Richard and met his wife on a search party when they went missing. Like, this story is so closely connected to us. And so, like, as we just started to unpack all of these little connections of being close to the families, it just started to feel, wow, like, we really have to keep moving in. I don't know for you, Ben, but that's how it felt. I'm like, there's just too many coincidences that are leading us in this direction to put energy towards it.
I think everything you just named gave us purpose to take this on. I think what has also been really wild is just because it's in our backyard and you start knocking on doors and speaking to people, where those connection points occur. I mean, this is kind of a silly anecdote, but, one of the people that we were really looking to speak to and she has not contacted us yet, but because Danielle was going through a divorce at the time, she had an attorney. And according to people we talked to, she was kind of noting everything to this attorney, sharing, taking, jotting down everything that was going on in her life leading up to her disappearance. And I remember going to the lawyer's office and, it became clear that they don't work there anymore. And I spoke to the current tenant who was filling the office space. And I said, do you know where they went? And they said, you should talk to the landlord. He probably knows. I give the landlord a call. I went to high school with the landlord. He was like a buddy. Like, it's just how crazy this story is in our backyard. And I think as you said, energetically, it motivates us every day to just continue to have conversations, continue to knock on doors, because we do believe that it is going to be one piece of someone's recollection of something they heard at a bar, at a rumor that existed in their neighborhood, that ultimately is going to be that missing piece that the FBI needs to make an arrest.
Here's where my heart swells in listening to both of you, just in the past few seconds here, is the fact that one person turns up missing, it affects a community. Two people missing. Now you're. You're talking to friends. You're talking to the landlord. And it's like everybody is connected, and it has affected them. You've just painted this unbelievable photograph for me.
Yeah. It's so true, and I think what makes this case so fascinating, and it's specific to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a huge character in this story, Arrow. Each individual neighborhood is so different in Philadelphia. But there are pockets in each neighborhood that are rumors about this case. Where if you go to Fishtown, for example, which is a neighborhood in Philadelphia, the majority of Fishtown believe a very specific story about what happened to them. You go to South Philadelphia, same thing there, different rumors. But that's what they are, they're rumors. But where there's smoke, there's fire. Mm-hmm. Think about that. How does a neighborhood, a collection of people that have no connection to Richard and Danielle, have an understanding of what happened? I mean, there's been reporting on this case, but not a ton. I mean, a lot of law enforcement has kept information very close to them. So the streets are talking. The streets are talking. And I find that very interesting. And it goes back to the FBI undoubtedly believes that there are people that know exactly what happened, and we need those people to come forward. And so it's just really fascinating. And it's been fascinating to see how the neighborhoods work in the city in which we live.
Where can people go to get in contact with you?
Yeah, Ben, you can take that.
Well, I mean, first off, I would say listen to the podcast, right?
Exactly.
Get a sense of the story. Do your own research. So the podcast can be found. It can be found anywhere you listen to your podcast. Right. I would say the places to go are Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, the iHeartRadio app. Those, I would say, are the best places to find it. To get in touch with us, at the end of every credit, we provide our email address, right? So that people can get in contact with us. But I would also encourage people, if they hear something that moves them, if they know something, we also provide the FBI tip line, because this is active. The FBI is receiving tips currently. This is, as much as it is cold, it is not a closed case. And there is a belief that it's going to be these tips that are going to, from the listeners, that are going to bring some justice,
right?
Bring some closure, ideally, to these families that have lived, in this hell for the last 19 and a half years.
Wow. You guys have got to come back to the show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Thanks. And Arrow, if I can just share the email address, it's thereandgonepod@gmail.com. Thereandgonepod@gmail.com. So if you know anything, please email us, or you can call the Citizens Crime Commission at 215-546-8477. That's 215-546-8477. So thank you.
I love it. Andrea, I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys be brilliant today, okay?
Thank you for the time, Arrow.